This week on ANN, thousands of young people come together to be the sermon during the 2017 Global Youth Day.
The Adventist Development and Relief Agency responds to what is being called the greatest humanitarian crisis in over 70 years.
And later, we learn practical tips to keep your church safe during this year's Safety Sabbath.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
First in the news, thousands of Seventh-day Adventist young people answer the call to be the sermon on March 18th for Global Youth Day.
Pictures and videos were shared on social media with the hashtag GYD17. The campaign generated an impact of more than 137 million impressions across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This year's service theme was donating blood, and along with blood drives, Adventist young people from around the world found other creative ways to serve their communities throughout the month leading up to Global Youth Day.
A broadcast from inside a Kenyan prison generated discussion on how to help prisoners. Taiwanese youth cheered up new friends in nursing homes. And in Spain, youth ran a love expo where passersby could learn more about how to express affection to others using their own love language.
In the coming weeks, we'll share more videos and stories of how young people impacted their communities. For now, here's a video from the Bahamas of young people who gave out free hugs.
Global Youth Day ushers in an international week of prayer. The theme this year is the Reformation that changed the world. During the final Sabbath, youth are encouraged to invite former members back to church. You can get material for the week of prayer at gcuyouthministries.org under Resources.
Global Youth Day is organized every year by the Youth Ministries Department of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church.
It is estimated more than 20 million people in 4 countries throughout East Africa are facing starvation and famine. The situation in Yemen, South Sudan, Somalia, and northeast Nigeria is being called the single largest humanitarian crisis since the United Nations was founded in 1945. The Adventist Development and Relief Agency is starting a new emergency response campaign to help with the crisis. Ashley Isley has more.
ADRA has launched a worldwide campaign. So this is our offices around the world all coming together to raise money for the famine. Right now, famine's been declared in South Sudan, and it's probably going to be very soon in Yemen, Somalia, and Nigeria. Plus, a lot of other countries in that area are suffering with the hunger crisis as well. And it's unprecedented need. At no time in history has there been 4 famines at one time. So it's really a need that we've never seen before, and it's huge. So we're trying to respond in a huge way with all of our offices around the world. So of course here in the U.S. we're asking our donors to give, but you know what, in Norway, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Canada, everyone's giving as well. So we're coming together as this church family to show, you know, God's love in a huge way by feeding people who are dying, and they're going to die by the millions if we don't act now. So we're just really asking people to give. and they can give at adra.org, and there's a huge banner on the page. They can't miss it, and give everything they can, because this is a need bigger than we've seen in a long, long time.
Of the 24 regions in Peru, 12 are in a state of emergency due to heavy rain and massive flooding that has left the country devastated. More than 70 deaths have been reported and thousands have been displaced. The Adventist Development and Relief Agency in Peru has begun providing aid in northern Peru through the hashtag Auxilio, disaster campaign. According to Isabel Asca, head of communication for ADRA Peru, a partnering NGO has prepared 313 food kits to be delivered by ADRA to those in need. ADRA Peru has set the goal of collecting 500 food kits. So far, the goal has been exceeded. We will bring you more as this story develops.
Each year on March 24, World TB Day is set aside to build awareness that tuberculosis still remains an epidemic in much of the world. Tuberculosis, or TB, causes the deaths of nearly 1.5 million people each year, mostly in developing countries. We asked Dr. Peter Landless what causes TB and what little steps each of us can do to help in the fight against tuberculosis.
The main cause is a bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. But what are the predisposing factors? Predisposing factors: poverty, malnutrition, overcrowding. Wherever there is a lack of resources, one tends to get this. There's an additional component, people who have chronic diseases, and one very specific one is HIV and AIDS. Although there are 10.4 million people in the world with tuberculosis, probably about 1.4 million cases that we would know and understand, particularly if the new cases are associated with HIV and AIDS. So the main causes would be the issue related to resources and poverty. The other one would be chronic disease and immune deficiency. What can people do to help? People can help in many ways. Firstly, by trying to make sure that people that we are in contact with, that we are aware of their situations, whether they're in overcrowding, people who are losing weight, people who have appetite loss, who are in our orbit. Let's pay attention to that. Can we donate? Yes, we can. There are causes one can donate to. One can go to the websites of the World Health Organization and see where tuberculosis programs are being done. There's ADRA works with tuberculosis, doing tremendous amount of good. So ADRA, those are things that we can do to make a difference.
Swedish radio news and other media has reported the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Sweden is behind the change in how the Swedish Scholastic Aptitude Test, or SWEDE SAT, will be administered. Beginning in 2018, the test will be offered alternately on Sunday and Saturdays instead of only Saturdays. The SWEDE SAT is one important way to gain admission to higher education. Since the introduction of the SWEDE SAT in the late 1970s, it has only been administered on Saturdays. For many years, the Adventist Church has challenged the law on behalf of its Sabbath-keeping students. In 2001, the Equal Treatment Law gave Adventist students legal grounds to ask for alternate examination day. Since then, a secret fallback test has been administered, just one every 5 years. Swedish Council of Higher Education spokesman Ake Lernfalk explained that offering the SWEDE SAT on Saturdays and Sundays is a sensible alternative. He added that this arrangement will be beneficial to many, regardless of religious beliefs. Jorn Hansen, president of the church in Sweden, was pleased with the new ruling. It is with great satisfaction that we have been able to come to this solution to make it possible for our young to have equal opportunities to enter into higher education. We wanted to follow up with a story we reported on a couple weeks ago. Dan Jackson, the president of the church in North America, and Alexander Bryant, secretary of the church in North America, recently participated in the first Facebook Live event, Is This Thing On? The North American division sent this report.
Is This Thing On?, a Facebook Live discussion hosted by the North American division, was held March 14 at Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska. The first event of its kind, Is This Thing On? Promoted and initiated open dialogue between church leadership and student leadership from Adventist colleges around the division. Students, young adults, and viewers were able to bring questions directly to NAD President Dan Jackson and Executive Secretary Alex Bryant. No topics were off limits. Students appreciated the transparency and openness of church administration in answering their questions.
I really enjoyed the conversations. I really enjoyed the support that we received from our church leaders. I really feel like they want us to succeed in the church and they want us to lead in the through the path that they have set for us, and I really feel that we're supported by them. I think that we have a lot of conversations still to be had. I think this is a fabulous start.
I felt really confident about this first Is This Thing On? I felt like it addressed the pertinent issues that a lot of young people are struggling with. There is a lot that goes on in the upper levels of our church that doesn't necessarily trickle down all the time. And to maintain this kind of open communication, to understand some of the more nuanced issues that go on, I think will help to contribute to understanding across North America and ultimately increase the confidence and the buy-in that we all have into our church.
I was really encouraged by the conversation. I really loved how we would be able to get people in their dorm rooms and in their couches at home and bring them here to Union College. It was just really encouraging and empowering.
I think most issues could be solved if people would be willing to come to the table together and talk about it. And I think this is the catalyst to the progress of the church and tackling a lot of key issues. I was talking to some other people. I think people in my generation have become really cynical in terms of the church and our direction, but I think this really cleared up a lot of things, and it showed us that our leaders actually do care about real issues. They care about us, they care about our voice, and I think it's so necessary to have some clear understanding where our church stands on the important issues.
This conversation opens up people's eyes not to be afraid to ask questions, because how can you learn more if you don't ask and discuss it? It helps people not to be afraid to share their opinions, because a lot of people shelter what they want to say because they don't want to sound wrong. So being able to share in an environment, even though this was a small environment, so it's easy to share with people because it's just small, but even bigger places, if you start small, you can reach out more and talk more and not be afraid.
I valued that our church listens to our young adults, and that our young adults caught a vision that our church listens to them. That was most powerful to me.
Is This Thing On has over 32,000 views on Facebook and made over 2.7 million impressions on Twitter. Make sure you follow them on ittoshow.com for information about upcoming events.
Coming up, Adventist leaders in Australia ask for compassion in government funding.
But up next, a group of women learn vegetable farming during a special training in Tanzania.
I firmly believe that true freedom comes from a connection with Jesus Christ. He himself said in John chapter 8, "Those whom the Son has set free are free indeed." That means freedom from guilt, freedom from fear. That means an assurance there is a transcendent power who is working that together for my good.
May I work in with you, young fella?
Yeah. Go for it.
That's the way you do it. Gotta put a little weight on it. Well, I'll put it back up here for you.
Welcome back.
Women in rural communities across East Central Africa are now experts in the art of vegetable farming and evangelism.
The women recently attended a one-week training at the church headquarters in Arusha, Tanzania. The event was organized by the Adventist Development and Relief Agency in Africa, in partnership with the Women's Ministries Department in East Central Africa.
The women were trained with essential vegetable farming skills, which allows them to be independent. This self-sufficiency is necessary for the eradication of poverty in their rural communities.
Zivai Negomasha, Program and Planning Director of ADRA Africa, said, "Doing vegetable evangelism is a good way of changing lives for not only non-believers, but for church members as well, since many people lack the knowledge of how to eat healthy and take care of their bodies."
Church leaders said the current situation in the region is alarming. According to the latest statistics from the World Food Program of the UN, Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest prevalence of hunger. 1 out of every 3 people is either malnourished or undernourished. Recently, Adventist young people in Burundi, along with regional church leadership, distributed food to 260 families in the Bubanza province in Bujumbura City. The food served families who are suffering from famine caused by lack of rain. Joseph Nikubayo, president of the Adventist Church in Burundi, reported the distribution of more than 3,000 kilograms or 6,800 pounds of beans, more than 5,000 kilograms or 11,500 pounds of maize, and over 1,000 kilograms or almost 3,000 pounds of porridge flour. Magalilo Makalange, youth director for the church in East Central Africa, reinforced 1 John 3:16 and encouraged those in attendance to overcome selfishness and share what they have to save the lives of others. He also urged people to prepare for heaven, where there will be no famine, suffering, or pain.
March 25 is Safety Sabbath. Each year, Adventist Risk Management, or ARM, aims to bring awareness to emergencies that could happen in your local church.
David Fournier has more about what your local church can do to raise safety awareness.
Safety Sabbath is an opportunity for local churches to focus on practical risk management and really get into some emergency planning. What we're asking people to do is conduct some sort of an emergency drill in their local church. They can do this during Sabbath school or the divine service, and we think this is a really great opportunity for all of our members, our children, our elderly, all of our people, to become more aware of what are they going to do during an emergency situation. Where am I going to go? Who am I going to coordinate with? You need to know ahead of time what you're going to do during an emergency situation. This is part of the church's broader plan to build awareness about risk management issues, safety issues in our churches, to keep our people prepared and safe in the event of emergencies or dealing with other safety issues.
Whether your church is participating in Safety Sabbath this year or not, here are 3 practical suggestions from ARM about what you can do to help ensure your church is safe. Create a safety committee, conduct risk assessments, eliminate 15 passenger vans from church or school use.
If you'd like more information about Safety Sabbath, visit their website at safetysabbath.com.
And we'd like to hear your Safety Sabbath stories. If you or your church participated in this event, please visit us on Facebook at Facebook/Adventist News and use the hashtag Safety Sabbath 2017 on all your social media posts.
On a different note, this week the world celebrated World Happiness Day,
Nice.
and we want to know what makes you happy.
So with this in mind, we're asking you to post a photo or short video on Instagram with the hashtag ANNHappy of what makes you happy or what happiness means to you.
We look forward to seeing your posts, and we will repost our favorites. Just search for Adventist Church on Instagram.
Coming up, Henry Hilton shares the amazing story of how the first church in Brazil was formed.
But up next, we have the next episode in the Lineage series.
Ich bin Gerald. Ich spreche Deutsch. Es gibt so viele gute adventistische Videos, doch so wenige sind übersetzt. Du kannst uns helfen.
Join the Amara translation and caption team today. Amara is easy to learn and fun. You can volunteer in your free time. Join this community today and provide great content in your language.
My brother's unexpected death shocked me into changing my life. A friend of mine said, "Why don't you do a triathlon?" So I swam and rode and ran until I discovered life is more than just human strength. I race because my health matters. I believe because my faith matters. I'm Ed. I'm a Christian. I am an Ironman, and I've discovered my whole life matters.
Welcome back.
This week, as Lineage continues, we learn how the dates of Easter were set and are still kept to this day.
You can always learn more about the series by visiting lineagejourney.com.
Whitby, England, today a seaside town, but the spiritual heritage of this town dates all the way back to the 7th century. In 656, the abbey was founded by Abbess Hilda, and in 663, the Whitby Synod was held here between the leaders of the Celtic Church and the leaders of the Catholic Church, and it was not without confrontation. This synod set the dates for Easter that are kept by the church today, and it also led to the establishment of the Roman religion elsewhere in England. At that time, in this part of England, the Celtic Church was the dominant faith, due to the missionary work of Aidan, who had been sent over from Iona. These people were Bible believers, they kept the Sabbath, and they did not recognize the papacy as ruler in spiritual affairs. Colman was the successor of Finan. Finan was the successor of Aidan, who originally started the work here in England. And Colman had only been working for 3 years when the Council of Whitby was called. He had a couple of things against him. Firstly, that he had only been working for 3 years. Secondly, that his opponent, Wilfrid, was well drilled in the papal arguments. And thirdly, that the Queen of the King was Catholic. The principal question of the debate was, when would the date of Easter lie? Now, Wilfrid had spent 4 years before this in Rome, where he was well studied, and he wanted to come back here to Northumbria, determined to bring the Celtic Church into subjugation. He wanted an open debate, and King Osby agreed for an open forum. So on one side you had Colman, the Scottish clerks, and Abbess Hilda, and on the other side you had the king, the prince, the queen, and Wilfrid. And so the debate began. Colman skillfully answered the questions in regards to Easter, but Wilfrid brought the debate around to the issue of Peter's authority and eventually succeeded in convincing the king of his arguments. The king and the people decided to conform to the pretended superiority of the papal Easter and thus align the church in England with the papacy, a shift from its original roots. Colman soon left for the island of Iona, and following this 4 dark centuries followed in England. Soon after, the Danish Vikings swept through England, bringing with them a flood of paganism. The Celtic Church would remain strong in Scotland, in Wales, and in Ireland, but even in England, followers of truth would persist over the centuries. The seed sown by Aidan, Finan, and Colman would continue, so that when John Wycliffe began his marvelous revival centuries later, his followers are thought by some to be those who maintained from generation to generation the doctrines of Aidan. One thing we learn here from the Council of Whitby is that though the cause of God took an apparent defeat, we have to remember that we're living in a great controversy where there's a battle between truth and evil. And like in the words of the song, Once to Every Man and Nation, where the words go, though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Sometimes in our life or in our work, it can look like the cause of God is taking a beating. It can look like the cause of God is suffering. Yet we need to remember that we're living in a great controversy. There's a battle between truth and error, between right and wrong, between God and Satan. If we abide in Christ, if we align ourselves with God, we can know that we will always end up on the winning side, though on the way there will sometimes be apparent defeats.
And now let's turn to Kenry Hilton for This Week in Adventist History. This week, what do a drunkard and an outlaw have to do with the first Adventist church in Brazil?
This week, we learn of how God used the unlikeliest of people, including an outlaw and a drunkard, to orchestrate the planting of the first Adventist church in Brazil. It was in the late 1870s that a young man by the name of Brocard got into trouble with the law and fled from Brazil back to Europe as a stowaway. Somewhere along that journey, he passed to Adventist missionaries the name and address of his stepfather, Carlos Dreifk, who lived in Brusque. Not long after, Carlos unexpectedly received multiple deliveries of packages of Adventist literature, including copies of the evangelistic magazine Voice of Truth. He was reluctant to accept these, but a village drunkard agreed to take the papers so he could sell them and use that money to buy drinks. So this drunkard became an unlikely colporteur. Additionally, those papers that could not be sold were used to wrap groceries at the store. And those wrappings and books made their way into the homes of families in the community. Their words captivated the hearts of readers and turned many to the Sabbath truth. With the field being prepared through an unusual form of literature evangelism, Pastor Frank Westphal organized a church in the late 1890s with 23 members. And so, on March 23, 1896, under the supervision of German native Huldrych von Graf, the first Seventh-day Adventist church was constructed in Brazil. The church was built at Gaspar Alto, which is just outside the city of Brusque in Santa Catarina. The church is known locally as Igreja Adventista de Gaspar Alto. This history reminds us that God can use the unlikeliest and seemingly worst among us to spread the gospel and advance his mission. And that was This Week in Adventist History.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
And we'd love to hear from you. Send us your feedback and tell us how your church is making a difference in its community.
Be sure to capture plenty of video footage and photos, then write up a summary of the event's important details. And feel free to send full video reports as well.
You can reach us by sending an email to adventistnews@gc.adventist.org.
Before we say goodbye, here's a passage of good news from the first book of John, chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. The passage says, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth."
That's our program for this week, but remember you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.